My name is Melissa, I'm 38 years old, and this is about my daughter Emily. Emily is 14, caught in that in-between place where you're not quite a little kid anymore, but you're not yet fully grown. She's gentle, soft-spoken, and when she cares about something, she gives it her all. 3 nights. That's how long she spent practicing. She locked herself in her room, stood in front of her mirror, whispered her lines over and over again. She tapped her fingers against her leg to keep rhythm. She even printed the speech she wrote, then rewrote it by hand because she said typed words don't feel personal. On the back of the paper, she wrote her name. She said, "What if I drop it? What if someone finds it and doesn't know who tried so hard?" That's how much it mattered to her. And the speech wasn't for a school assignment, it wasn't for a contest. It was for something that should have been safe, my parents' wedding anniversary. 40 years together. A family celebration. Emily wanted to honor them. She wanted to be heard. She believed deep down that if she stood tall enough, smiled wide enough, and spoke with her whole heart, they would finally see her. That's what broke me later, because she still believed sincerity would win. But looking back now, the signs were already there. I should have seen it. The little smile my mom gave whenever Emily brought up her speech. A smile too tight, too sharp. The way my dad quickly changed the subject each time we mentioned it. The extra chair squeezed in at the kids' table, like she'd been assigned her place. And my sister Rachel's son Tyler, he arrived in a full suit, like he was already the star of the evening. But Emily didn't notice. She carried those folded note cards like they were her passport to belonging. She thought that this time maybe she'd be welcomed. The venue was a hotel ballroom 2 hours from our house. Round tables with white tablecloths, folded napkins shaped like swans, champagne glasses waiting to be filled. A piano player in the corner was doing a jazz version of My Heart Will Go On. It looked perfect, at least on the surface. We got there early. Rachel was already there, flitting around with her clipboard like she was running some international conference instead of a family dinner. "Oh, you made it," she said, giving me an air kiss like I was a late delivery, not her older sister. "Tyler's going to do a little something after dessert." She tossed it out casually, as if we'd all known. Her son Tyler already walked around like the world applauded every breath he took. He wore a blazer, hair slicked back, grinning like he owned the room. My parents smiled when we walked in. My dad gave Emily a quick nod, a muttered, "Hey kiddo." My mom looked her up and down, tilted her head and said, "Ma, you've gotten tall." Then they turned straight to Rachel and Tyler. Like always. Like we were just background characters. We sat toward the back. Not rude, not front and center either. A place that said we know where we belong. Emily hardly touched her food. She picked at it, kept her hand on her purse the whole time. Inside it was her folded speech, 2 copies because she had brought a backup, tucked carefully into her coat pocket. Every now and then I saw her lips moving. She was practicing silently, whispering to herself, mouthing the words she had worked on for days. I squeezed her hand. "You're ready," I whispered. She smiled just slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the stage. Dessert was served, dry chocolate cake, tiny mints no one touched. Then the toasts began. Aunt Linda went first, with a funny story about my mom learning to drive back in the 70s. Everyone laughed. Uncle Brian followed, telling how my dad once tried fixing a dishwasher with a butter knife. More laughter. Then of course Rachel stood up. She had a slideshow ready with soft focus photos, dramatic music. Their wedding, their first house, vacations at the beach, grandkids. Mostly pictures of Tyler, of course. My mom dabbed at her eyes. My dad chuckled proudly. When it ended, the crowd stood and clapped like it was Broadway. Then finally my mom took the mic. "If anyone else would like to say a few words, now's the time." That was the moment Emily had been waiting for. She pushed her chair back slowly, started to rise. Not all the way, just halfway, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. And then, my mom looked right at her and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh, don't embarrass yourself." Not whispered. Not gentle. Said like she was doing her a favor. My dad nodded in quiet agreement. Emily froze. Her shoulders slumped. Her hand trembled as she folded her speech, placed it in her lap, and sat back down. And just like that, the microphone was handed to Tyler. "Let's hear something fun," someone shouted. Tyler launched into his comedy routine. Silly impressions, made up stories about family vacations, even props. People laughed mid-joke, clapped before he finished. I couldn't stop watching Emily. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes straight ahead. She sat so still, like if she was quiet enough, maybe she could disappear. When Tyler finished, Rachel hugged him, my mom kissed him, my dad clapped him on the back. No one turned to Emily. No one asked. She folded her speech again, slipped it into her purse like it was something shameful. And then I heard it. A few words from the eldest daughter. That was me. I stood up. Not because I had a speech prepared. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. When they called for the eldest daughter, I didn't think. My body moved before my mind could catch up. 1 second I was sitting beside Emily, watching her fold that speech like it was a secret she wasn't allowed to tell. The next I was on my feet, my chair pushed back. A wine glass in my hand just to give me something to do as I walked. The mic stand wobbled when I reached it. I steadied it, cleared my throat. Forks clinked. Someone coughed. Rachel leaned back, looking smug like she was bored before I even opened my mouth. My mom adjusted her bracelet. My dad sipped his drink. I smiled back at them. Not the polite kind. The kind of smile you give right before you tip the first domino. I had something I was going to say tonight. I began, my voice even. But I think someone else should be heard first. People shifted in their seats. A couple of cousins exchanged looks. Someone tilted their head toward Rachel, as if she was the one who should know what was happening. I reached into my purse. Not for my words. For Emily's. At some point during the night, she had handed me her folded paper. I hadn't even realized when. Maybe out of instinct. Maybe because deep down she knew I was the only one who would make sure her words weren't wasted. The paper was slightly wrinkled. The ink pressed darker in spots where she'd rewritten the lines too many times. I unfolded it slowly, raised my eyes and started to read. Hi, I'm Emily. I'm Robert and Diane's granddaughter. A few heads turned. A couple of polite smiles. But no clapping. Not yet. I wanted to say something tonight because, well, 40 years is a long time. And I've been lucky to watch how you've stayed together. The room grew still. People stopped shifting in their seats. The air changed. Her words weren't grand or flashy. They were simple, thoughtful. She had written about the little things. Things only someone who had been watching closely would notice. Like how my dad always refills my mom's coffee before she even asks. How my mom folds and saves gift bags under the guest bed, so they can be used again. How they always sit on the same side of the couch during movie nights. Details so small, so ordinary, but that's what made them beautiful. By the time I reached the end, her handwriting had changed. You could see where she'd pressed the pen harder, written faster, with fewer cross-outs. I know I speak differently, she had written. I know I pause a lot or start over. But I wanted to say thank you. And I mean it, even if I don't sound perfect. Silence. Not the polite silence you get when people are waiting for dessert. The kind of silence that lands heavy, that makes everyone aware of themselves. I looked up from the page. She practiced this every night this week, I said slowly, carefully. But she wasn't given the mic. Still no one moved. I let the pause stretch long enough that it sank into them. Finally, someone at the back started clapping. Then another. And another. A ripple of applause spread across the room. Polite at first, then stronger. Not everyone joined in. Rachel didn't move. My mom kept her hands folded neatly on her napkin like she was posing for a portrait. But I felt it. A shift. Even if small. When I sat back down, Emily didn't say anything. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked at me like I'd done something she hadn't realized she needed. After a moment, one of my mom's cousins came over, walking gently like she didn't want to scare us off. She leaned toward Emily. That was beautiful, she whispered. I'm sorry you didn't get to read it yourself. Emily nodded, just barely. You're a beautiful writer, she added softly. Don't stop. Another cousin gave Emily a quick side hug. Someone else said, I didn't know you had that in you. And Emily, she didn't exactly smile, but something in her shoulders loosened, like maybe for the first time she felt heard. I didn't gloat. I didn't look at Rachel. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. The truth was already out. And for once, the loudest voice in the room wasn't the one that got the last word. The next morning, the backlash began. At 6 a.m., I got a voicemail. No greeting, no pause, just my mom's voice, sharp as glass. You had to humiliate us in front of everyone, she snapped. That was completely unnecessary. Your father's furious. We looked like fools. That was it. No good morning. No call me back. Just rage in a pressed blouse. I played it on speaker while Emily ate cereal in her pajamas. She didn't flinch. Then came the text from Rachel. Seriously? Over a speech? You turned her into some kind of victim. You should be ashamed. Ashamed. And I was, not for what they thought, but for ever allowing them to silence us quietly for so long. Emily looked up from her cereal, spoon halfway to her mouth. Did I do something wrong? She asked. That stopped me cold. I sat down across from her, took a breath. No, honey, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. They're just not used to being on the other side of the silence. She blinked, nodded slowly, and went back to eating. But I could feel it. The question stayed with her. You'd think after that night it would die down. You'd think people would move on. But families don't always work that way. The whisper started instead. Cousins texting cousins. Aunts with opinions. Uncles saying, why make drama at a family event? Why not let Tyler have his moment? As if Tyler hadn't had every moment. As if Emily had asked for too much. But I didn't defend myself. I didn't send long texts or call around to explain. I didn't post anything online about justice or fairness. Because Emily didn't need a campaign. She needed space. She needed quiet. She needed to know she hadn't done anything wrong. And then, something unexpected happened. A few weeks later, a local teen program put out a call for speakers. It was a storytelling night, for kids who wanted to share something real. Emily saw the flyer at school. I watched her pause in the hallway. She stared at the sign longer than she needed to, then quietly snapped a photo of it on her phone. That night at home, she finally asked, do you think I should do it? I looked at her, and without hesitation I said, I think this time no one else gets the mic. The auditorium smelled faintly of dust and old wood. You could hear the hum of the stage lights, the shuffle of papers, the nervous coughs of kids who were about to read their stories out loud for the first time. Emily sat in the second row, her hands folded tightly around a notebook. She wore her blue sweater, the one with the frayed cuff she chewed on when she was anxious. Her leg bounced under the chair, rapid like a drumbeat only she could hear. I sat 2 rows behind her, not next to her, not hovering, just close enough so that if she turned around she'd know I was there. When the event coordinator stepped onto the stage, the room fell quiet. Tonight, she said with a wide smile, you're going to hear stories written and spoken by local students. Some are funny, some are serious, but all of them are true. And that's what makes them powerful. The applause was warm, encouraging. And for the first time I saw Emily's shoulders lift just a little. The first speaker was a boy with 2 long hair who read a hilarious piece about getting locked out of his house in pajamas. The second, a girl who told a story about losing her grandmother, her voice cracking in the last sentence. Each kid was met with claps, cheers, and the occasional "you've got this" from the audience. Emily's name was third. She froze when they called it. Her eyes darted around the room, her breath shallow. She gripped the edges of her notebook like if she let go, she'd fall apart. I leaned forward just slightly. You don't have to be perfect, I whispered, barely audible, though I knew she couldn't really hear me from where I sat. But maybe she felt it, because after a long pause she stood. The walk to the stage was shaky. She held her notebook so close to her chest, it almost hit her face. When she reached the mic, she hesitated, adjusted it once, twice, cleared her throat. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and run. But then she opened her notebook. Her hands trembled, her voice caught. And then she began. Hi, I'm Emily, she said, her voice soft, halting. I don't usually talk in front of people, but I wanted to try. There it was. The truth. Simple. Raw. Unpolished. A small clap came from the back of the room. Then another. She looked up, startled, but then something shifted in her eyes. She took a breath and kept going. Her story wasn't about my parents or about Rachel or even about that anniversary night. It was about being quiet, about what it feels like when words get stuck in your throat, heavy like stones. She described sitting in classrooms, knowing the answer, but not raising her hand because her voice didn't sound like everyone else's. She talked about rehearsing sentences in her head, only to give up because by the time she was ready, the moment had passed. She admitted that sometimes, silence felt safer than speaking. But then she wrote about how silence wasn't the same as not having something to say. Her words were hesitant, broken in places, but they were hers. The room was utterly still. No one shuffled. No one whispered. No one checked their phone. Even the kids who had been joking in the back row leaned forward, elbows on their knees, listening. And when Emily finally reached the last line, "I might not always sound right, but that doesn't mean I don't have something worth saying." The applause erupted. Not polite, not hesitant, loud, real. Some kids stood. A couple of teachers clapped so hard their hands went red. Emily blinked, startled again. Then, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. When she came off the stage, her steps were lighter. She clutched her notebook, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "Did you hear them?" she whispered when she reached me. "All of them clapped." "I heard," I said softly. "And they weren't clapping out of pity. They were clapping because you made them listen." She nodded, breath shaky but proud. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about proving my parents wrong anymore. It wasn't about Rachel or Tyler or that night at the banquet hall. This was bigger. Emily had found her stage, her voice, her own power. But families have a way of creeping back in. Because while Emily was finally stepping into the light, my phone was filling with new messages. Some supportive, some not. One from my mom. "I heard about that little event you took her to. You're encouraging bad habits. She doesn't need to be paraded around like that." One from Rachel. "God, you're milking this. Let her be a kid instead of making everything a drama." And then one from my dad. Just 3 words. "Enough is enough." It would have been easy to ignore them, to delete, block, move on. But families, even broken ones, have gravity. They pull. They demand orbit. And the anniversary night hadn't been the final domino after all. It had only been the first. Because soon they weren't whispering anymore. They were calling a meeting. A family meeting. And Emily and I, we were the reason. The living room smelled like coffee and old arguments. My parents sat on the couch like judges in a courtroom, my father with his arms folded, my mother clutching a mug she wasn't really drinking from. Rachel leaned against the wall, her phone in her hand but her eyes sharp, watching everything. And me? I was standing, Emily at my side. She clutched my hand so tightly my fingers tingled. They had called this meeting. But I already knew they weren't here to listen. They were here to end it. My dad cleared his throat first. "This has gone too far," he said, his voice clipped, measured. "You've turned something small into a circus. That little performance thing, parading her around like that? It's cruel." Emily flinched at the word. I squeezed her hand. My mom chimed in next, her tone softer but no less sharp. "She's a child, Melissa. Children need protection, not spotlights. You're setting her up to be laughed at." "She wasn't laughed at," I said quietly, steady. "She was heard." Rachel let out a laugh, quick, bitter. "Please. That wasn't people listening. That was pity applause. You think a bunch of strangers clapping means anything? When she gets into the real world, no one's going to be that kind." Emily's grip on me tightened again, her knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to throw every insult back at them. But I'd learned something sitting in that auditorium. Shouting wasn't power. Silence wasn't weakness. Truth spoken simply was enough. So I crouched down, eye level with Emily. "Do you want to say something?" I asked her softly. "You don't have to. But if you do, this is your chance." She looked at me, wide-eyed, terrified. Then she looked at them. Her lips trembled. Her voice cracked. But she spoke. "I'm not broken," she whispered. "I just talk different. But I'm not broken." The room went still. Even Rachel blinked, caught off guard. Emily took a shaky breath. "When I was on that stage, people listened. They didn't laugh. They didn't call me names. They just listened. And it felt good." Her eyes watered, but she kept going. "And if you can't do that, if you can't listen, then maybe you don't get to be the ones who talk about me anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My dad's jaw clenched. My mom stared into her mug like she could drown in it. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it, then muttered under her breath, "Drama queen." But even she didn't sound sure anymore. Because the truth was simple. Emily had spoken. And once words are spoken, they can't be shoved back into silence. We left soon after. No slamming doors. No screaming matches. Just the sound of Emily's small footsteps beside mine, steady, certain. Outside, the air felt different. cooler, lighter. Emily squeezed my hand. Did I do okay? She asked softly. I knelt in front of her, brushing the hair from her face. You did more than okay, I told her. You changed the whole room. And for the first time, she believed it. I could see it in her eyes. The weeks after that were strange. The calls slowed. The texts thinned. When they did come, they were clipped, formal, almost like business transactions. It wasn't peace, not exactly, but it was space. And in that space, Emily grew louder. Not loud in volume, loud in presence. She joined the school's writing club. She started volunteering to read, not every time, but sometimes when her teacher asked for volunteers. She even made a new friend, a boy named Noah, who thought her stories were way cooler than the boring ones in textbooks. Every step was small, but together they built something bigger than I ever imagined. One evening, months later, Emily brought me her notebook. She flipped to a page near the back, where her handwriting slanted messily across the lines. It's about us, she said shyly. Do you want to hear it? I nodded, heart in my throat. She read aloud, stumbling here and there but pushing through. It was a story about a girl who thought she was invisible, about a girl who thought her words didn't matter, and then about someone who told her they did, and how slowly she started to believe it herself. When she finished, she looked up at me nervously. Do you like it? Emily, I whispered, pulling her into a hug. I love it. And one day the world's going to love your stories too. Not long after, she stood on another stage. Different auditorium, different crowd. But this time when they called her name, she didn't freeze. She walked to the mic. She lifted her notebook. She began. And I knew whatever my family said, whatever they believed, Emily had already written her own ending. Because this was no longer their story. It was hers. And she was finally telling it. Families don't always end in fireworks. Sometimes they just fade into the background noise. Rachel moved to another city a few months later. My parents still send cards on holidays, stiff, polite, full of words that don't mean much. But the thing is, I don't need their words anymore. Neither does Emily. Because we've found our own. And they're louder than silence ever was.